What's up, everybody? This is Will B, the singing veteran. I'm coming on here once again. I've done a few things about AI. Now, there's been some stuff that's, when they talk about it being the Wild Wild West, it is definitely ever changing. And there have been some changes going back and forth with platforms trying to claim ownership and all this other kind of stuff. But when you talk about the actual use of AI, I'm finding myself in the middle where most sane people land 90% of the time. And there's the people who say, any use of AI is absolute a travesty against the music industry, and you're not real musicians. I don't know. I mean, you're not real songwriters. You shouldn't be making music, blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that. When they come with that type of logic, first of all, most of the people who are saying it couldn't make music if they had to do every aspect of making music. There's very few songwriters, singers, composers, producers that do everything. You would be limiting it to people like, okay, you would have Prince, D'Angelo, Alicia Keys, Ray Charles. And even Taylor Swift doesn't do all of her own stuff, but I'm trying to diversify. There would be no Michael Jackson, there would be no Whitney Houston, there would be no Mariah Carey, there'd be no Luther Vandross. All these talented singers who don't play instruments, none of them would exist. All of these talented musicians who can't sing, none of them would exist in the music industry, based on the logic that if you can't do it all, you shouldn't be in music. And that's ridiculous. That's how ridiculous that sounds to me. I'm a writer, I'm a singer. I've been producing for over 30 years, way before AI came into the picture. And what I look at it as is a tool so that I can get my vision out there without depending on somebody else to carry out my vision. Now, there's those prompters too. If you're just going on a computer and saying, well, I want this kind of feel and that kind of feel, and you're not writing the song, you're not doing anything, I agree. That doesn't take talent to do. Anybody could do that. Anybody who can actually type. Actually, my 3-year-old grandson could go on there and in the prompts just put A, and it will make a freaking song. And that's not real. That's not real. But the thing is, I don't want to fall. What us people in the middle tend to do is depend on logic to drive how the outcomes happen. And that's not usually what happens. Usually it's one of the extremists from one side or the other, because they're more passionate. They are not logic based, so their arguments have to be emotionally driven, and that's it. You don't have to think to say, I'm not trying to point fingers, but one person who pops up the most in my feeds and everything is Kehlani. First of all, I don't even know what she has put out, but I can also say this: I know she doesn't write. Because she invited people to come and write for her, which was the crock of shit. Because if you are a writer, getting access to somebody like that is virtually impossible. But she's invited people to write for her, which means that she would, knock herself out based on her definition of what someone who should be in the music industry is. She would knock herself out because she doesn't write. I don't know what her singing sounds like, honestly, but I can say this: I know she doesn't play music, and she doesn't play instruments either. So basically, she's saying, I just don't like the tool that you choose to use to make music, so you should be in a different area. I know good and well she's not multi-platinum, which means that whatever she has put out hasn't been able to, do something. Somebody else said, a lot of these people who are going on here ranting about, AI is going to take over, people's positions and stuff like that. It's a position you never held before AI came about. You've been struggling to get to where some AI, you're mad because Zanaya Monet, or however the hell you say her name, has a record deal that you would have shot somebody for, But the young lady who was a poet, who was behind that, I can understand. She put emotion, she put feeling, she put her story behind a character that she created. She did create, whether you want to call it creating or not. Now, that's not going to be the norm. Everybody who does it like that is not going to get, everywhere that Zanaya Monet is getting. But to say that she's a bad example of creating is really you being very limited in your thoughts. You didn't do it. That's about the only thing I can say. And if you can make a hit, then do it. Don't worry about what the other people are doing. Only the people who don't have it are the ones who are complaining most of the time. I have not heard any multi-platinum artists say never use any of this. Not one. The people who are in the industry that I've heard from say, yes, it's a tool. And I agree, it is a tool. It's a creative tool. Now, if some people say, oh, I won't use it to overcome blocks because part of the journey is getting to the song and blah, blah. That's your opinion. And you do things the way you do it. And some people stay in relationships, toxic relationships, because they believe that working it out is the thing to do. Everybody has different opinions. Bottom line, if you're out there, like I said, there's extremes on both ways. I'm in the middle. When people say that people who use AI, period, are not creators, you're full of crap, because I was creating way before AI was even a thing. So, it's not like if you start using a tool that comes up, then you lost your skills. You didn't lose your skills. You changed the tool you're using. And these people who, if you can't see that, that makes no sense. I also will say there's no way on earth that, because you use a tool, that the tool should be able to claim ownership to your possessions either, because that would be like saying, I built a house from scratch and every nail that I use this hammer on, the hammer owns it. Like I said, logic has to prevail in a lot of these things. And, this debate is never going to end. I do believe that there should be a challenge, though, to every single one of these people who say, if you can't do this and if you can't do that, you should just leave music alone. If they can't sing, write, produce, compose, play all of the instruments, not just, most of them are a musician that plays one freaking instrument. If you can't do like Prince or D'Angelo or somebody who could do every aspect of the situation from beginning to end, then you need to lose that argument, because that argument makes no sense. You can't do it. So if you quit music, I'll quit music.